Good day to each and everyone. Me and my partner are here to discuss to you the continuation of the Chapter 1, Lesson 2, which is entitled The Learning Principles on Development, Social and Individual Differences. By the way, my name is Milia Shaldi Badilla and my partner is Pearly Rose Azarcon. In this lesson, we can able to know what do we need to consider or what are the things that we need to consider when it comes to our students. But before that, let me read to you the background of this study.
The learner-centered psychological principles, which are consistent with more than a century of research on teaching and learning, are widely shared and implicitly recognized in many excellent programs found into these schools. Learner-centered psychological principles provide a framework for developing and incorporating the components of new designs for schooling. So, that's the background of the lesson for today.
Now, let me introduce to you the learning objectives for today's lesson. At the end of the lesson, students will able to explain the development and social factors and individual differences that influence learning. Recognize classrooms instances that apply the learning principles related to development and social factors and individual differences, and apply the principles learned in classroom specific situations. So, to start, development and social factors as well as individual differences are considered as a critical factors in the capacity of learners to engage in learning. It is considered as the critical factors in the capacity of learners to engage in learning. It is because every individual learner student has their own uniqueness, differences, diverse development, and also the social influences. Now, what are the developmental and social factors as well as the individual differences?
Developmental factors includes emotional, intellectual, and physical development from conception to maturity, while social factors includes parental attitude, peer relationship, learning experiences, and recreational activities.
So, in general, developmental and social factors are providing a kind of environment that helps to encourage the optimal brain development as well as the social connection and collaboration.
Individual differences. The most differences of learners are the gender, age, intelligence, ability, interest, prior knowledge, learning style, motivation, locus of control, self-efficacy, and last, epistemological beliefs.
Individual differences helps us to understand not only what makes us humans similar to one another, but also what makes us or them different. So, under the developmental and social factors, we have the Principle 10 and the Principle 11. The Principle 10 is the developmental influences on learning. The first thing is that as individuals develop, there are different opportunities and constraints for learning. So, as we encounter yung iba't ibang klase ng estudyante, di ba? Makikitaan natin or makikita natin yung iba't ibang strength and weaknesses na meron sila or the opportunities and constraints na meron ng bawat estudyante. Then, learning is most effective when differential development within and across physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. So, as a future educator, when teaching, we need to take into account the different forms of development such as physical, cognitive, and the social domains in order to ensure that our students will learn as much as possible. Often, some learners are not learning well because there is a mismatch between the learning activity and the learner's developmental stage. So, as a student, we go through the different stages of life and we approach learning in different ways. So, as a future educator someday, in our classroom, we will not just check their capacity in learning but rather also their physical, cognitive, and social domains. So, Halimbawa, yung estudyante mo is malabo yung mata, mahina yung utak, o yung bang mahirap sumabay sa mga itinatalakay ng guro. So, ibig sabihin, kailangan din natin tingnan yon. Kailangan iti-take consideration na rin natin yon, kasi kung hindi natin yon i-consider, ay talagang mahihirapan silang sumabay o makahabol sa klase. So now, let's move on the principle 11. This principle is the social influences in learning. Learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. So, learning can be enhanced when the learner has the opportunity to interact and to collaborate with others on some instructional tasks. So, ngayon pa lang atin ang sasanayan ng ating mga estudyante na makipag-collaborate o makipag-cooperate sa mga like group works upang pagdating nila sa different parts of work na gagawin nila ay hindi na sila mahihirapan na makipag-interact sa iba. Dahil if we could face the reality, walang taong makakamit ang pangarap ng hindi nagpapatulong o walang tulong ng iba. Kailangan natin ng tulong ng iba sapagkat sa mundong ginagalawan natin ay hindi tayo makakatayo ng mag-isa. Ika nga, no man is an island. With this kind of learning, student learns to appreciate and respect different diversity, and they can also practice their listening skills, and at the same time they can also know how to consider each other perspective and contribution. So those principles are under the developmental and social factors. So, in individual differences, here is Pearly Rose Osarcon to continue to discuss to you about what is individual differences all about.
Good morning, everyone. So, I'm Pearly Rose P. Zircon. I will be going to continue the discussion where Miss Padilla stopped her lesson. So, we will be going to tackle the individual differences and the principles under the individual differences. So, first, let's start with the first principle under the individual differences, which is learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning that are a function of prior experience and heredity. Diversity is a natural part of life. The learning environment is the best example where diversity is manifested between and among learners. Each learner has or her learning style, intelligence, potential skills, talents, learning preferences, as well as cognitive abilities, which are the effects of both experience and heredity. Theories on multiple intelligence learning styles and differentiated instructions are all to be considered when planning the delivery of lessons. Teachers assist and support their learners in identifying their most effective learning style, dominant intelligence, skills and potentials, and help them identify the ways and means on how they can use them to maximize learning. So, yun nga, makikita natin ang kanilang atake, ang kanilang iba't ibang atake, kung paano nila gagawin ang mga activity na binigay mo sa kanila o ng guro sa kanila. And you as a teacher, you need to appreciate, you need to consider that kasi nga, naka-base yun sa background na meron sila doon sa experiences na meron sila, and another from the word hereditary, like kung anong meron sa bahay nila o anong meron ang parents o pamilya nila, kung ano ang natutunan nila from their houses, yun din ang ginagamit nila when it comes to approaches and strategies into our school. So, we need to see it from them, and hindi po natin may kakailan na sa mga parents, o mga magulang nila ng bawat estudyante mo ay may iba't ibang pamamaraan ang mga ito sa pagpapalaki ng kanilang mga anak na kasalukuyang mga mag-aaral ngayon. So, tayo, ngayon bilang isa sa mga estudyante, nakikita ang differences sa isa't isa, lalong-lalo na in the near future, dun sa generation na kung saan ay hahawakan nating mga estudyante. Sa panahon na yun ay grabe na ang diverse. Kung ngayon nga ay medium diverse na, ano na lang kung sa susunod na mga panahon o henerasyon, sobrang diverse na dahil sa mga experiences nila na dinadala nila sa paglaki nila dito sa mundo o sa loob ng eskwelahan. For example, mailan ka sa mga estudyante mo na ang kanilang pamilya o ang estado ng kanilang pamilya ay nasa itaas na level o high level. Katulad nila ng doktor, nurse, teachers, and marami pang iba. And ang iba din naman ng ilan sa mga estudyante mo ay nanggaling sa pamilyang nasa low level o nasa ibaba of situation in life. In that case, you as a teacher o makikita mo kung ano ang kaibahan ng bawat estudyante mo at kung paano o sa anong paraan mo sila dadalhin. So because of their differences, you as a teacher, you need to have a backup plan o tinatawag nating plan B for you to make sure na walang maiiwan sa klase sa pamamagitan ng pag-consider ng differences ng iyong mga estudyante. Maaagapan mo ang mga komplikasyon o complication sa iyong silid-aralan. Dapat ay bigyan mo ang bawat isa ng assessment o mga gawain na makakapagpa-improve sa bawat weaknesses and strengths ng iyong mga estudyante. Bilang isang guro, dapat ay maging malikhain ka, innovative and supportado ka sa lahat ng bagay na magiging dahilan na improvement ng iyong mga estudyante. And because of diversity or our uniqueness, our student life will be meaningful by those kind of teaching, and also by that we can avoid our students to be discriminated. Current trends in teaching encourage teachers to apply concepts on multicultural teaching, differentiated instruction, o tinatawag nating DI, and then universal design for learning, UDL. All these principles support the premise that teachers should be creative, innovative, and supportive of the individual differences of their learners. These trends in teaching offer various ideas, options, and ways by which diversity can best be used for meaningful teaching and learning. Halimbawa, mayroon tayong mga estudyante na nanggaling sa ibang lugar o nanggaling sa Visayas. Dito natin malalaman kung bakit may DL o Differential Instruction at Universal Design for Learning na kagamitang pampatuturo. May mga ganitong pamamaraan sa pagtuturo para yung mga estudyante na nanggaling sa ibang lugar ay agad-agad na makaka-relate sila in general kahit pa na may iba't ibang kultura o tradisyon sa kanilang lugar. So, dapat ang gagamitin mong mga scenario o situations inside the classroom or inside the class ay dapat makaka-relate ang estudyante mo with different culture and different mindset depende kung saan sila nagmula. Again, bilang teacher o bilang isang guro, hindi ka dapat mag-stick sa isang estudyante lamang, kundi kailangan mong umikot o isa-isahin kilalanin ang bawat estudyante mo sa iyong klase upang malaman mo kung ano ang mga limitasyon mo sa pagtuturo at kung ano ang kanilang dapat matutunan sa iyong klase. So let's move on to another principle under the individual differences. Learning is most effective when differences in learners' linguistic or cultural and social backgrounds are taken into account. So, we need to take into account, we need to consider that ano ba ang ibig kong sabihin sa ito o sa ganito. Multicultural teaching encourages teachers to consider their learners' linguistic, cultural, and social backgrounds. Language can be a barrier in learning when learners cannot express themselves properly and when the learning material is not also related to their social text. So, may mga ilan sa mga cases na ganito. Lalong-lalo na language can be a barrier. So, for example, if you talk about the other information about what happened or what are the things in other countries that have, syempre, hindi sila makaka-relate kasi nga, from the word inclusive, you need to make your student part of it, or you need to relate it to your students based on their culture, language, and kung saan sila lumaki o kung anong social background nila upang mas madali mo silang makuha at ma-appreciate at mas madali nilang ma-appreciate ang lesson na diniscuss mo a while ago. So yun nga, bilang isang guro dapat ay makakagawa ka ng gawain na nakaka-relate sa kanila base sa kanilang mga pinagmulan o kung saan o kung anong mga lesson na kanilang natutunan sa kanilang tradisyon o kultura na meron sila o social backgrounds sa kanilang lugar. We need to consider that because it is part of the teaching na bilang isang guro ay dapat i-considera mo ang bawat ang iba't ibang differences sa bawat estudyante mo. Culture makes one person distinct from other people. Students manifest differences in language, values, belief system, and way of life. And inclusive, from the word inclusive, it means to relate or relate. Classroom is one that welcomes and respects these differences, which are incorporated into their learning activities. They are also used as actual examples of concepts presented during discussions. Students do not feel discriminated upon and ridiculed because of their uniqueness as an individual. When each learner feels valued, accepted, and appreciated for what he or she is, this affirmation contributes to a positive learning environment. So, yun nga, sabi ko kanina, we need to consider kung saan sila nanggaling o kung saan nagmulan ang ating mga estudyante upang mas maunawaan natin sila at maunawaan nila tayo. So, we need to relate the lesson na makakapag-connecta sa kanilang kultura upang magkaroon ng ideya sa lahat ng diskusyon na iyong gagawin. At sa pamamagitan na yon ay ma-appreciate ka nila at mas magiging mapadali ang iyong mga diskusyon na ileleksyon sa kanila sa harapan. At sa pamamagitan rin na yon ay walang ma-discriminate na mga estudyante mo. For example, there's a one situation. My family will be having a vacation in Bicol. Her problem is how you are going to get along with the people in Bicol. Dahil hindi ka nga taga doon sa lugar na yun, syempre hindi mo alam kung ano ang ginagamit nilang lingwahe o language doon. Kung gagamitin mo naman ang ilang lingwaheng kanti lang nun, which is yun ang mother tongue talaga natin, siguradong hindi ka nila maiintindihan. Hindi rin naman pwede na gamitin o gagamit ka ng lingwaheng Bicolano dahil hindi ka nga marunong gumamit nun o hindi ka marunong ng mga salita sa Bicol. So, ang gagawin mo, gagamit ka na lang ng English language o Tagalog language para makasabay ka sa usapan nila. Sa pamamagitan na yon ay nakakapag-connecta ka sa kanila dahil naiintindihan nyo na ang isa't isa. At ma-appreciate ka din nila dahil may ginawa kang paraan upang magkaintindihan kayo. So, yun. May kakonekta natin doon ang pagiging guro. So, bilang isang guro, dapat gagawa ka talaga ng mga paraan na kung saan makakapag-connecta ka sa iyong mga estudyante. Dahil sa iyong mga estudyante nga, hindi natin may makakakuble na may iba't iba tayong mga personality o may iba't ibang personality ang mga estudyante natin sa silid-aralan, sa loob ng silid-aralan. So, ikaw na bilang guro, gagawa ka ng isang epektibong pamamaraan upang mas mapalawak o mas makakonekta ka sa kanila. So now, let's move on to another principle under the individual differences. Principle 3 under the individual differences. Setting appropriately high and challenging standards and assessing the learner as well as the learning progress, including diagnostic, process, and outcome assessment, are integral parts of the learning process. Assessment and evaluation are essential part of the teaching and learning process. The results of assessments conducted are used to gauge the learner's strengths, weaknesses, limitations, and areas of difficulties. Teachers can also determine what kind of support and scaffold the learners need. This process also includes knowing which instructional material would best assess a learner for better school performance. Of course, you need to evaluate your student. You're just not there for them to teach, but you need also to evaluate, assess them, so that you can be able to identify their differences. That will help you as a teacher to be aware on that case. And sa pamamagitan yun, ma-aware mo ang iyong sarili sa kanilang mga differences at makakagawa ka ng mga activity o mga epektibong gawain para mas makilala mo sila at malaman mo kung saan lang pwede o malalaman mo ang iyong mga limitation sa pagtuturo sa kanila base sa kanilang mga pagkatapos mong i-evaluate ang kanilang mga learnings. Assessment should be an ongoing process, whether it was formative or summative. Results should be used as a means of improving the teacher's strategies and techniques in teaching. Low results may not always be attributed to students' negligence and difficulties, but may also be because the teacher's strategy was not effective during the delivery of the lesson. Assessments therefore is for both the teacher and the learner. By doing the assessment that you give to your students, you can be aware on their differences behavior that they have in school, and because of that, you can know what you're going to do to solve that problem that you have in your classroom, or what are the things or what are the supports that the learners need to improve their weaknesses into strengths despite of their differences. So this lesson will not only revolve to your students but also you as their teacher. And these lessons will revolve to your students and also to you as their teachers, what you are going to do with this kind of students. So again, as a teacher, you need to build or to create another way that can able to learn that kind of student in your class. This is not a special treatment. To that student, but rather taking consideration sa kind of development na meron ang estudyante mo sa iyong silid-aralan. So, bilang ikaw isang guro, dapat mo talagang i-consider ang mga bagay na yon upang mas maging epektibo kasi sa kanila at mas maging epektibo ang iyong mga pamamaraan sa upang magkaroon sila ng mga bagay na matututunan nila na ma-apply nila sa kanilang pang-araw-araw na buhay. So, dapat natin i-consider yung mga bagay na yun kasi isa yun sa mga importante na bilang ikaw isang guro, epektibong guro, ay dapat yun ay isaalang-alang mo upang mapangalagaan mo sila at magagamit nila yun para para mag-improve sa kanilang mga iba't ibang weaknesses in life. So, dito na lang po nagtatapos ang aking talakayin. And thank you for listening. Thank you and good morning once again. So, the summary of this chapter is theories in learning provide a vibrant framework for understanding the teaching and learning process. The principle provide a framework that could assess education in improving their teaching and learning practices. The primary goal of these principles will make teachers more reflective of their current practices so that learning becomes more meaningful and exciting to all kinds of learners. School reforms and innovation should be a regular part of the education process. So that's the end of our discussion. I hope that this discussion will be able to assess us to be a productive and effective teacher for the near future. In this lesson, entitled that Learning Principles and Development, Social and Individual Differences. So thank you, and once again, good morning to everyone. God bless.